So today's video is going to be 5 things that I dislike about my rooftop tent and in rooftop tents in general. So if you've been watching the channel, this channel has been going on for 7 years. I've always been a swag man, always had my swag, never really worried about rooftop tents. And the Ranger is the first car that I've had a rooftop tent in. So I still love my swag. I still love the idea of having a swag, setting up on a stretcher and that kind of stuff. But there are massive benefits to going a rooftop tent, and there's obviously massive cons. So I'm going to go through the massive cons in a rooftop tent in this video. So you might not have thought about these things, and you might be in the market to buying a rooftop tent. So have a quick look at this video, and it might just steer you in the right direction if a rooftop tent's going to be suitable, or it might not be suitable. So the first thing that I dislike about rooftop tents is weight, bulk, and load. So like any mod you're going to do to your car, you really need to consider all factors. How much weight is it going to add? Go to GVM. How much is it going to cost me in fuel? Is it going to add so much more fuel that it's not worth doing the mod in the first place? Do I need to change my suspension to suit this mod? And these are all things you need to take into consideration when you're buying a rooftop tent, because some rooftop tents can be extremely heavy. I've got a 35 to 40 kilo drifter rooftop tent, soft shell, no floor, very, very basic. So it doesn't affect my car too much at the Bowser. Probably a quarter of a litre or something like that, but obviously with wind resistance, that kind of stuff being so high up in the car. But you can get some rooftop tents which are 150 kilos, which can cause a massive disruption to how your suspension works, how much fuel the car uses, and all those things that need to be taken into consideration. So as I said, the big con, or the first big con in my eyes, is weight and how bulky they are. So if you're going to use your car as a daily driver and you're going to put a rooftop tent on the car, you need to consider how much fuel that it's adding to the Bowser every single time you go to fill up, because if you leave it on there all the time and you're only using it a couple of times a year, you might want to consider having a system where you can take it off and on. And that comes to the second part of this, is taking these things off and on. It becomes a massive drama. Once they're bolted up there and they look sleek and happy days, they're all hooked up, they can be really good. It can be happy days. You have the rooftop tent on there. When I go to camp, you just pop it up and all is well, right? But there are definite cons to this. So if you want to remove the rooftop tent for whatever reason, maybe you need to do something with the roof rack, maybe you need to change your setup a bit, you generally need 3 or 4 people to obviously lift these things off, because there's 100 kilos and you're lifting above your head. And if you've got a lifted car, it becomes even more of a struggle. So some people get setups in their garage where they can sort of use lifting mechanisms to take them off and all that kind of stuff. I'm in the same boat with my car. Since I lifted it, I can't fit the car in with the rooftop tent in the garage. So every single time I need to put the car in the garage, after a trip, I need to take it off. So I need to call up the neighbor, hey mate, can you give me a chance to pull this off, and all the rest of it. So it becomes a burden. So with my swag, I put the swag in the back, chuck it in the garage, happy days, or job's done. So definitely something to think about. If it's a daily driver and you have to be taking this thing off every single time you do a trip, or if you're only doing a couple of trips a year, really consider if it's worthwhile for you, or maybe just go back to the humble swag or a tent or something similar. Number 2 is something I didn't really think about, but when you're set up with a rooftop tent, your car is fairly mobile. You can't really do anything with it. And what I've actually done now when I'm setting up for camp and that kind of stuff is the last thing I actually do is set up my rooftop tent. Because in an emergency situation or something happens, it's got to take you a couple of minutes to get that thing down, all set down, obviously back into the packaging, and drive away. Now, depending on the rooftop tent you got, some are different, some are faster and some are slower. But I know mine takes about 3 to 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes to sort of get all packed down, take all the bedding and the pillows and all that kind of stuff out. So in an emergency situation, it can be very detrimental to the situation where time is very critical. And just if you want to move, right? So you get to the camp spot, oh, looks beautiful, hunky-dory, you're at this awesome spot, birds are chirping, but just want to go down a bit further. There's a little bit of noise over there for some people that I don't want to sort of associate with. I want to go a bit further, so I'm a little bit away from people. Got to pack the whole thing down again. So it's just something to consider, right? With pack-up times, if you've set up somewhere and you need to get somewhere away really, really quickly, that's 4 to 5 minutes on your roof, getting it all packed away and all the rest of it. You could probably dodge it and just get it sort of slapped down and as, you know, rough to get sort of out of where you need to be if it's an emergency situation, but you do need to consider it. Whereas a swag that's sitting next to your car, you just hop in your car and go, because you can obviously leave the swag there, who cares, right? If you're in an emergency situation, get away. But obviously once the rooftop tent's set up, you have to get that thing down. You just can't drive, obviously, with the rooftop tent open down the highway to get back to a hospital or something like that. So just consider that as your part of, obviously, your purchasing process. Coming into number 3 of my things that I dislike about rooftop tents is getting the car perfectly level. So if you've seen in some of my videos, I've got all these great campsites where I go to, and they're sort of on cliff faces and, beaches and all the rest of it. But you do have to be perfectly level when you're setting up these rooftop tents, because if you're in there with somebody else, you can roll around and obviously roll into each other if you got it on too much of an angle, cause sleep issues, that kind of thing. So some people obviously use max tracks or treads, obviously, to level their car, or use a rock or whatever. But it is something to seriously think about. If you haven't got a level campsite, you can have the worst night's sleep you will ever get. So really consider about where you park these things, and also consider how you're going to level your car. If there's nothing there at the campsite, how are you going to level this thing if the car's on a massive lean, and when you're sleeping you keep going to one corner and again having a bad sleep? So just consider that in your purchase. You do really need to get these things fairly level. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you have to get these things fairly level to have a really good night's sleep. So number 4 is condensation. Now, it doesn't matter what you have in the world of camping, when you're in the middle of the night and it's cold outside and you're breathing hot air out of your mouth, you're going to get a thing called condensation, and the inside of your swag, tent, rooftop tent, whatever, is going to get moisture in it. So generally after a trip, or when you've sort of come back home after a trip, you would open your swag up, let it all breathe out, let it dry out, and happy days, right? You got to do that with the rooftop tent. You got to do that with the normal tent. So there's nothing different there. Where the impact to your life can be with the rooftop tent is if this is your daily driver and you get back on a Sunday afternoon and it's raining, because obviously you're going camping in the winter, right? It's raining and you're trying to dry your rooftop tent up, you may be with an issue, because if you leave the moisture inside those tightly closed clamshell rooftop tents, you're going to introduce a thing called mold, and it's going to get very musty in there. So it's a bit of an issue with more the clamshell types. Mine's not too bad because I can take the cover off and open it up and air it out. Or if I take it off the car, obviously in my situation it works quite well because I just put it on the ground and open it up. But if it's on the car and it's your daily driver and it's a clamshell type rooftop tent and you get moisture in there, and they all get moisture, doesn't matter who is trying to sell you a rooftop tent, they all get moisture in there. Doesn't matter what brand you've got. Now, it can become an issue with condensation and mold and musky and all that kind of stuff brewing up in there as you close it down after a wet trip or something like that. And if you haven't got an opportunity to dry it after a trip, like as I said, if you've got a daily driver, it becomes a massive issue, and your $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 rooftop tent can start filling with mold very, very quickly. And if you're like me, you kind of forget about the last trip and you might have left it closed for a couple of weeks. It can get very stinky up there. So really consider that in your purchase. If you're going to do a weekend trip, and this is only a weekend thing that you do, you love this camping lifestyle, but you do it on the weekends. If you are going to use your rooftop tent in a wet environment and you're going to get condensation in there, please make sure you open it up when you get home and let it air out. It can be a massive issue with your rooftop tent if you leave that moisture in there. So number 5 is going to be 2 parts: the value proposition and your bedding. So some rooftop, we'll go with the bedding first. Some rooftop tents allow you to have all your bedding stay inside there. So Alucab, Bush Company, all those brands that are really thick, they're about yay big off the top of your car, they allow you to have your bedding in there, happy days. You just pack it up and go, which is, it's a true like a minute setup and a minute pack up because all your stuff's inside there. If you have any soft shell rooftop tent like I've got, the Drifter, if you have any slimline, if it's 16 millimeters like the one I used to have on the car, you could have your sheet in there, but no pillows. So you still need to find a place to put your pillows in the car, take them in and out every single time, which, as I said, adds pack up time and setup time, all that kind of stuff. But if you've got a soft shell like mine, I can't put anything in it. The only thing I can actually leave in my rooftop tent is my heated blanket. So because I haven't got a floor on my rooftop tent, the floor, obviously the underneath gets quite cold, so I put a heated blanket in there which just runs off 12 volt and that keeps me warm at night. But if you have any soft shell, Kings, Drifter, Dune, whatever, you can't put your bedding in there. So you still need to put your bedding somewhere in the car, and you still need to take your bedding in and out of the car every single time you set it up, which, as I said, comes to my other part, set up and pack up times. You can add a lot of time just packing it up and setting it up. You do need to do this with the swag as well. Don't get me wrong. You can't leave your bedding generally in a swag because they become so big. But just think about that obviously with which one you buy. If you're looking at those real slimline ones, which are like 16 mil off the car, you're going to have to take your bedding in and out. So if you want to get a thicker one, that's one of the benefits to the thicker ones. Now, the second part of my last gripe about rooftop tents is the value proposition to the everyman. So I'm blessed to be in this situation where I enjoy going camping and I've got a channel that surrounds it and I can go camping multiple times per year and get out there and enjoy it. But if you're doing this as a weekend warrior, if you're going out like twice a year, the value proposition of rooftop tent gets very low. And when I say value is how much you've spent and how much you're actually going to use it. Now, obviously, with everything, the longer you have it, the value proposition gets better. But if you're looking at using your car twice a year to go camping and use a rooftop tent twice a year to go camping, that $2,500, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 rooftop tent in your car doesn't seem like a great value proposition. And when I say that is, if you're going to do 2 trips a year, and let's say it's a $5,000 rooftop tent, each one of those trips is costing you $2,500. And obviously that will get cheaper as the longer you have it, but that's the way you got to look at it. If you're spending $5 grand on a rooftop tent, you could save $4.5 grand, buy a $500 swag from Ranger, which is a great swag by the way. I've still got my Ranger swag, great swag, and use that $4,500 to buy like better tires or a lift or awnings or roof racks. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things you could use that $4.5 grand for to mod out and trick out your vehicle. So just think about that when you're looking at the value proposition of a rooftop tent. It's just really hard to justify to someone to put a rooftop tent in their car if they're only going to use it a couple of times a year. If you're going out every day and this is your going around Australia car and you're going to use it every single day, 100% spend the maximum amount you can afford to buy a rooftop tent that's going to be comfortable to sleep in every night. Mainly because it's your only bed, right? You want it to be comfortable. But for someone like me and probably most people watching this channel, you're going to go out a couple of times a year, maybe twice, maybe 3 times. Maybe don't spend $5,000 on that rooftop tent. Maybe only spend $2,000 on that rooftop tent, because the amount you're going to use it is probably not going to really justify the price. So hopefully it gives you a bit of an idea around tips and tricks around rooftop tents and gives you a bit of an idea about if you should buy one or not. And look, if I haven't covered anything in the video, drop some comments down below. I kind of like to hear your pros and cons for rooftop tents. So if you own one, what's some of your pros and cons? And yeah, just some of your feedback around rooftop tents in general. So like always, thanks so much for watching the video. Have a great Sunday and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.